Welcome to the Treason podcast. My name is Eric DePriester. I'm the writer and director of Treason. And with me today is a very special guest and a friend of mine for far too long, Mr. François Comtois, the composer behind Treason, as well as the drummer of popular rock band Young the Giant. François?
Hi, let's get this show on the road. I have about 5 minutes.
Typical rock star behavior.
I do think, especially having watched it again, and especially watching it as the election is just coming up, in a few weeks now, it paints a picture that I kind of wanted to see. Just this sort of this person who is so set in their ways and so entrenched in their own kind of story that they are unwilling to see any other angle, and it takes them to the point of sort of disaster, essentially. So it was cool to watch. Obviously, I watched a bunch of it when I was working on the score, but just to sit down, put it on TV, watch it from start to finish, I did think that the story was one that's worth telling right now, for sure.
Well, and to that effect, I think, I watched it a week ago for the first time since early July. And before that, I'd probably watched it, easy 50 to 100 times in full. And that was I feel like this was the first time I've been able to watch it and actually think about the story and be like, oh, well, that's the whole picture we're telling. This is an actual movie that happened that's telling a story about a character, and we pulled it off. There are, it works. But up until then, I've just been so microscopically focused on, does that door creak come in a second too soon?
Mhm.
It's a hair too dry. Can we just get a wetter door? What does a wet door sound like? Is that even a thing? It's just
I
this
can get you a wet door if you want, but I got all kinds of reverb plugins. Yeah, I think it's when we were talking about it, when you were dealing with post-production, and this is something I can totally kind of attest to, is the being so in the weeds with something, and you're not looking at it as sort of a greater body of work. You definitely don't have the perspective that you need to kind of appreciate it that way. I find by the time we're done for Young the Giant, for any album I work on, really, I have zero desire to listen to it, because I've spent so much time just breaking down all the parts and thinking about stuff that when I listen to other songs or other artists, I'm not listening to it with that type of a critical ear. And it's only several months after we put it out and I haven't thought about it, and then I go back and I find that I can kind of appreciate it for what it is a little more. So I'm glad to hear that you're at that point, because I know how frustrating and crazy you can feel when you spend that much of time in the weeds. You're coming out of the jungle.
And I've got an interesting follow-up on this, just because. So I found myself last week watching it. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm proud of our work for sure. It's a great movie, and there's also a million things that bug me. Not a million things, but there's oh, I wish we'd had time to get one more thing of that take so we could have had a little bit different reaction. But have you gotten to the point that you're comfortable? Let's take your debut album, for instance. Have you gotten to the point that you're now comfortable with where it's at and how it's been recorded and everything about it? Or every time you listen to it, is there still just oh shit, we could have tracked that drum a little differently? Or
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the case for a long time. And if I listen back on anything we've done, I'm never thinking this is a perfect recording, or this song was, there's there's definitely always room for improvement as your ability and your tastes change, as you kind of, are more, your career moves on. I think that's always going to be the case. But instead of looking at it as we should have done this differently, I just take that kind of into future projects. That's what experience is to me, is you experience something and it changes your perception of how you're going to do things in the future. So basically the way I look at it is it's no use crying over spilt milk. Making that decision at that time has sort of altered the way that I make decisions now, and I think that that's worthwhile.
Yep. Well, you need to take the perspective that it's not a missed opportunity, it's a learning experience. Just
Yeah, exactly.
make the next record, the next movie even better based on every lesson you learned.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone that has like impeccable taste and technical ability and all that stuff from the get-go. It's, you know, you have to build that body of work. I mean, there certainly are, you know, the prodigies of the world, like, but I do think that you have to build on something. You know, there's a level that like you sort of initiate your career at, and like even if you're already, you know, really far ahead of everyone else as far as like your taste and your ability and all that stuff, like you're still going to build on those layers of your own experience. So
Yep.
yeah, I think it's a really common experience in, you know, in the artist community.
Well, and there's this quote that I love that I don't remember where it comes from. I feel like I always misinterpret, like I always mislabel it, but it's essentially along the lines of a poem is never finished; it's a simply abandoned. And
Mm,
I always think about that with art. There's at some point, you know, the short story's done. Like it's not actually done. I'm sure I could get back in there and fix the grammar and, you know, change the word choice here and punch up the ending. And there's always something else I could do to any work of writing, anything I've ever done. But at some point, you're just like, all right, it is what it is now. It's out in the world, or it's I've abandoned it, or just at some point, you're just now that project's done. Otherwise, fuck, you know, theoretically, you could just be tinkering on the same piece of music, the same piece of writing for 20 years. Why not?
right, but I think there's an answer to why not. Is there is like this point at which it is done. You know, it should be done. Like, and continuing to focus on, you know, putting all your efforts in it, you're going to get, I think the result will start to diminish. You know, like to push an awkward baking metaphor into it. If you got a dough and you just keep overworking the shit out of it, eventually it's just gonna, you know, start to toughen up and the gluten's all messed up, and then you got a shitty loaf of bread. So I think, but you never quite know exactly when that moment is. At least I don't, because I'm not a very experienced baker. But I think that's, you know, the same thing. Like you can just get so like microcosm about the smallest things. That I think it was Rick Rubin was saying how like he feels like, you know, when you're working with people who don't have patience, like that frustrates him, and he wants to be able to just like spend days on a tone and all that stuff. And we've definitely worked with people who are like that, and I think there's a place for that. I think you don't necessarily want to um, you don't want to throw out like that sort of experimental phase of like trying different things, but if that's all you're focusing on, then you kind of lose the picture. And the, you know, the most important part to me, the thing that people will connect to who aren't necessarily listening to it from a technical, you know, point of view, that's the most important, that spark. And if you just like cover that up in layers of just like, look how good I am at engineering, or look how good I am at thinking of interesting production techniques. I don't know what the equivalent would be for film, but once you lose that, then I think you lose what it is that makes people connect, you know, honestly with a piece of work.
Absolutely. Well, and also, I just that's not the way that I want to work. You know, even when that sort of process gets great results, like, you know, I think about something, and not that I'm anywhere near in that league, but I think of somebody like a Kubrick or a David Fincher, where they're known for doing, let's say, 90 takes of Jake Gyllenhaal picking up the phone in Zodiac. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's madness. I don't, you know, and you know, those are filmmaking geniuses. So obviously there's a method behind it,
Yeah.
and they get great results. You can't argue with the films they put out, but like I can't imagine watching somebody pick up a phone 90 times and saying, "Not quite right, Jake. I just need you to do that with like a little difference, or just, you know, shake off whatever actorly presuppositions you had about the scene and just pick up the phone like an organic person." Again, great results. I'm not arguing with that, but I think I don't think there's any way I could work like that. I feel like I would drive myself insane if I got that minute, that specific about every last little motion.
And then I wonder though, because like there's sort of analogs in like the producer world. Like, is that actually something that they're going to go over the 90 takes and they have the eye for that one or however many takes that is like, that's the one. Maybe it is, but I also wonder if that's more, same with like the Kubrick, like with the Shelley Duvall in The Shining, how like he basically made her go crazy. It was abuse, and under the guise of like artistic sort of perfection and wanting it to be a certain way, but maybe it was actually more that by doing that he was eliciting this response from his actors. Jake Gyllenhaal looks crazy. He looks like he's falling apart. Maybe because he had to pick up a phone, like like this it's like forced method acting, or like Phil Spector walking in holding a gun to someone. Said not that that's at all okay, but like what was he trying to achieve? Maybe, probably he's just in his case, he's just an unstable dude, right? But the idea that like you're trying to get something out of the performer, maybe it's not so much that you have like this vision and they didn't do it exactly the right way. But I don't know. I agree with you. I think that sounds like such a miserable project to work on if you're gonna get that in the weeds with it.
You have to admire the gall of it. Like to speak of The Shining, Jack Nicholson apparently was only fed grilled cheese sandwiches. Like,
Sounds great.
you have one of the, like, I guess at that point maybe the biggest film actor, like him, Paul Newman. There's a couple guys up in that rank, but like one of the biggest stars in the world, and you're like, I'm just gonna feed you grilled cheese and drive you crazy. Like, I don't want to do that, but I really just admire the gall of Kubrick of just like, yeah, I'm just gonna fuck with these people and it's gonna make good art. So probably not the best like personal decision. Like, I don't think he's necessarily a great person, even if he's a great filmmaker. And I don't know enough about him to really judge either way, but those actions are a little suspect, but artistically admirable, I guess.
Well, you kind of were forced to do something like that, just by having such a very limited budget, and that the place that you guys ended up staying. Like I came out for 3 days and I felt like I was going crazy. And it was at the tail end, and I could see this a little bit of a crazy look in everyone's eyes. It was. I thought that the house that you guys filmed in definitely did a great job of capturing the sort of atmosphere that like that family was living in, part of why they were going crazy. But the fact that the whole crew was also staying there was like, man, I commend everyone on that crew, because 3 days I was like, all right, I got a jet. So maybe that was part of why you got those performances, even though you didn't do it on purpose.
I mean, there's definitely something to that. Like, we first of all, we're in close proximity the whole time, so there's immediate, like, just like family, just like everybody was very familiar, very into it, and very involved, just because there's nowhere to hide. Like, you couldn't go hang out in a trailer across the set or whatever. Like, the set was where we all were. It's just,
Yeah.
have to be involved. But I definitely think we had to have shot it there.
Um,
Not even just that house, but like that area. Like, there is something very unnerving and frightening about being in the desert, and it's beautiful and it's spooky, and you're claustrophobic inside, and it's sandy everywhere, and it's dark, and the lights didn't really work in that house, and shit, we had to kick down we had to take the front door apart so we could get gear in. With the shower was flooding every day. Like, it felt like we were, not at war, but it felt like we were just like really roughing it and having to come together to, you know, beat this house back and get our thing made. So it really is just, there's a big bonding experience. And honestly, the end result is it looks more like the actual house those people would live in than any house that you would have shot in a higher level production, because you would have been able to manufacture stuff, or you would have been able to just get just the right decorations and whatnot. And as is, it's this weird mishmash of whatever desert junk the owner left there, some stuff that I brought in, some like distinct pieces for the characters, and then just, weird elements at work, right? Like, we just, we rolled up and there's a weird looking tree that's felled over by the house. So, all right, now we're going to get a shot of somebody playing harmonica on it. It's just, it was such a weird, beautiful and frightening environment that we couldn't help but just kind of, continually get inspired by it.
Yeah, I think it would have done a disservice if it ended up looking too curated and like art direction was involved. For sure. I mean, even it was so claustrophobic inside, and then you would go outside. Like I remember I went to go take a phone call outside, and I sort of was just walking without paying attention. Then before I realized, I kind of had gotten like pretty far away from the house, and it was like, it was pitch black outside. It's just sort of hearing like coyotes in the distance and the wind. Like it was, yeah. I felt a little unnerved, and I think that the actors were able to channel that in a way that it added to like the authenticity of it.
Well, to be fair, there were real things to be frightened of. Like the first day on set, we picked a bunch of hypodermic needles out of the backyard and put them in the trash. Safely. We disposed of them properly and everything, but like we found a couple different sleeping bags in different parts of the area right near the house. There's clearly squatters there very recently. Hell, at the first house we had so we had a secondary house for the actors, and the first house they're in got broken into. Like the way they had to flee in the middle of the night because somebody was coming to burglar the house. Like there's some very real threats in that desert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I think that as you like move on, this will be the type of experience that will have sort of, as a crucible, right? Like it's a big thing to go from just writing a play to doing the adaptation yourself, and then also being responsible as like, obviously like the production team you had was really great and helped a lot, but you were a producer, you were a director, you had an idea for what your vision was, and you had limited time, limited resources. I think that that's the type of thing that like makes you better when you do end up getting, even a modest budget, right? You know how to do things with what you have, and I thought that, hopefully that's something that will, because I'd love to hear now that we're months removed from the filming, like what your thoughts were on, as a first-time director, maybe the things that you didn't expect and that you didn't like know if you'd be able to, not accomplish, but to kind of move past them, because I can't imagine just going from 0 to 120 like that.
I mean, honestly, like going into it, I read every interview with the director I could about their first time directing. I would listen to every podcast. I was just like, let me figure out how the greats did it. Clint Eastwood, Scorsese, whoever my heroes are. Like, how do I embody those principles and just bring that down? So I thought I was kind of prepared, but then you get there, it's like a whole nother. It's as the director and producer, and Henry was there as a producer. He was a huge help. But the reality was I was always wearing like 10 hats. So the biggest unexpected thing is midway through the production we had to get somebody off the set because they were actively detrimental to the morale of the cast and crew, which I never expected that to happen, but it was a pretty quick we got a replacement, bing bang boom, and we're all set to go. So we were able to work that out. But I guess the biggest thing I was concerned about going in, and it's silly because I did the play, so we acted together once upon a time, so we have a little experience as actors. So I know actors. I did improv. Like I feel like I have good taste in doing that and watching acting. And that said, there's this part of me like, how do you know? How do you know when you watch the take and like that's the take, right? There is somebody.
You could do 90 takes and then you're covered one way or another, right?
Exactly, but we were also a small indie production where if we ended up doing 7 takes on a setup, people are like, yo, what are we doing? We're wasting time here. So I honestly, it just kind of fell in naturally. Like once I actually started getting the rhythm of the performers and watching them work, and honestly, once I just got comfortable as a director and got into the rhythm of my work, it kind of all fell into place naturally. There wasn't, every day there was a hiccup for sure. There was a new, like the flag blew over and now we need to find a new way to plan it. or, you know, we're missing this prop and now we got to do that. Like there was always some problem solving moment, but none of it ever really seemed insurmountable. But that said, I think, so at the time I was smoking probably maybe a pack a day, maybe half a pack a day. It was a lot of cigarettes,
Mm,
but I've since quit. I hope to completely stay off, but
that's great.
I think smoking cigarettes kept me sane and kept me healthy during that shoot, because every time I was in the house, I had to think about something, right? There was a performer asking me about the next shot. There was the DP asking me about like there was always something I had to worry about, something I had to focus on, somewhere to turn my attention anytime I was inside of that house. So for every couple hours, just to kind of step out in the desert, nobody would talk to me. I just kind of like stand there, look out in the horizon, and just be a silent weirdo for about 10 minutes, collect myself, and then come back and refreshed. Like that was huge. So I'm not saying I'm going to take back cigarettes next time I shoot a film, but you know, I'm going to have to pick up a tea habit or something like
Yeah,
that.
you can smoke tea. I think you should put that in the blurb of this conversation. Is there's a ringing endorsement for cigarettes, which is not really a common thing anymore. Yeah, I mean, cigarettes obviously huge. I was very impressed by. Again, I came in at the very end just to kind of see. I had uh, these ideas that I might be able to record some field stuff. I ended up walking around Joshua Tree Park looking like a crazy hipster weirdo, holding my little recording gear up against the wind going through the Joshua trees. None of that made the score, but the point is, when I got there, I was really impressed by the way that the crew was working together and the setup that you guys had. There seemed to be like this sort of devotion to like the greater kind of goal that like even though it wasn't ideal, even though some people were sleeping on like some thin sort of pull out couch mattress and hadn't been sleeping great, had been putting in serious hours, you guys had such a great setup where you were able to see the dailies and kind of put together the quick edit, the the DP, sound, the production team, everyone was. So I didn't see that event. I didn't meet the person who ended up being kicked off the crew, but I felt like everyone was willing to go above and beyond. And I wonder like how common it is to get a group of people that are not only good at their jobs but willing to just like put the time in and go the extra mile. If you feel like maybe you just got lucky, or I mean, obviously, I would assume that this is like a crew that you're going to want to continue working with in some way, shape, or form. Because they were just, like I said, I was just super impressed.
No, I mean they were fantastic and locked in, and you know, truthfully, I don't have an answer for how common it is because I've literally been on one set before directing myself, so I shouldn't be the one to judge that. But um, I honestly think the biggest, you know, we picked wisely, right? We got friends of friends. We watched their work. We made sure that everyone was individually talented, so that when they came to set, they would be able to function in their job. But as far as the everyone just pitching in and working toward the common good, you know, I think like we tried to keep things light and fun and keep it like a summer camp environment, so everybody was, yeah, we're working, but it's also a good time. But I think honestly the biggest thing was we had the edit bay, we had dailies, we had basically scenes to watch, you know, by day two of production. So honestly, even as a director, I knew we were going to go out and make a movie that I would be proud of, right? It'd be a good learning experience. I could show some people and maybe it can lead to the next assignment. It's just, you know, I didn't really have any delusions about the movie. I knew it'd be good for me, but I didn't think it was going to be what it became. And I think there was a moment for all of us where we first started seeing the dailies, we're like, oh damn, like this is a movie. Like this isn't like, you know, some rinky dink thing we're just going to put on YouTube and maybe a couple buddies can watch it. Like we're going to be able to get this to a distributor. Like we can get it on Netflix, or, you know, we haven't yet, but you know, like this is an actual product we're talking about. And I think once people started getting excited and realizing that we had the opportunity to make something real, it just kind of became like, well, shit, this is what we work for, right? Like as filmmakers, we're just trying to show off our talents and just keep making better and better things so we can just kind of keep moving up the ladder. So once you sniff out that opportunity, I think part of the part of your artistic sensibility just locks in. Like, we got a chance. And not to make too clunky of a segue here, but it's kind of, I feel like a similar thing happened with LeBron in
I
the
was thinking the exact same thing.
but that's real, right? Like, he
Yeah.
he got close enough to that ring and he was like, okay, this is real. It's not just, we're not like another injury away or blah blah blah. Like, I can take this ring right now if I grab it.
Yeah.
And yeah, he just showed up, did his business, and now we're champions.
I have a lot of thoughts about the Lakers. I want to put a little point on that last thing. Just maybe having experienced that now, and like, if you are talking to other directors, would you say that having like the sort of immediate feedback and kind of that instant gratification and being able to watch the project that you're making come together was something that you would recommend if you're able to kind of get that set up? Obviously, it was a location shoot and you had someone who was able to set up in there, but even if it wasn't perfect, like having a rough edit, I think that, I would see at the end of the day, you guys would go in there and everyone gets so excited. And maybe that was kind of like the momentum and the energy that like got you through the less pleasant moments of being on a long shoot with, limited resources.
100%. Like, it kept our motivation going. There's something new to watch every day. It's like, all right, well, we're done with shooting. Now let's go watch a couple scenes and it's already looking together. It's just, it was huge for morale. And honestly, the film wouldn't be what it is if we hadn't done it that way.
Mm-hmm.
There's countless times where Ryan, our editor, would put together a scene and then I'd watch it that night and realize that we were missing an insert shot. Or at the end of this take, Savannah moves the computer weird, so now you can see that the screen isn't what we're trying to show it is. So now we need to get the outside of her closing the window. Like, there's just enough times where we basically were able to do reshoots while still in the main shoot itself. This would be way less of a movie if we had that editing bay on hand. All right, but that said, I think the one, speaking directly to indie or first-time filmmakers like myself, I think the one apprehension I would have, or danger, is if you ride too hard on the daily wagon and they're not looking great. I don't think that would help at all. So maybe it requires a little bit of judgment of like, if it's not exactly the best thing, maybe you don't need to have the whole crew in the editing bay every night to get all excited. But yeah, hopefully you just don't have that problem and you just make some dope shit. But I could see that derailing, where everyone thinks you're making a great movie and you walk into the editing bay like, oh, well, that actually looks terrible. So I'm not sure why we're even here anymore. So hopefully,
I guess you're just kind of screwed either way if that's the case, right? If the stuff you're getting raw is not looking good, or it doesn't make sense, then no amount of like finessing and polishing is going to make it good. But yeah, anyway, that's an interesting sort of like practical kind of tidbit. Back to the Lakers, I think the parallel that you were starting to make was, and this is what was really funny, that I actually didn't think it was going to come together this way, is there was a whole like meme team kind of, the label. You had Dwight, you had JaVale, you had Rondo, you had, Morris later on. You had like all these guys that have been kind of cast aside, and you're thinking, what is it? What does LeBron see in this? Like, what is he hoping to achieve with this team that did this sort of like misfit toys? And I think what he was able to do is exactly that. It's like all these guys had playoff experience, had life experience, had, just in general basketball experience. And the fact that he was able to get them to buy in, the fact that Vogel and he were able to not to like just parrot the low post. I think it was the Game 6 Windhorse Low podcast, where they realized the best play, not the best play, but the sort of unicorn on this team is Anthony Davis. He is a defensive beast. Let us have our identity be, instead of just like LeBron going into the paint, kicking out to shooters, which has been really good for him. That's a oversimplification of how his teams have worked, but that's kind of been the way that they build teams around him. Let's make it a defensive team and let a 35-year-old LeBron go all in on defense from the beginning of the season and build those habits, because it's not something you can necessarily turn on when the playoffs come in. And it was, just the fact that they were all able to rely on that experience and that they were all buying into the system. It's like Vogel said at the end of Game 6, this is a defensive masterpiece. We were talking about it early on in the playoffs, like how weird is it that we're the Lakers right now, this historically great like offensive team, Showtime Lakers, Kobe Shaq, Kobe Powell, like they're gonna win this in a very convincing fashion. It seems like we believed, and we ended up being right, by being like an insane defensive scrappy team, and like a lot of great transition ball, some clutch shots when it mattered and stuff, but they just steamrolled teams with their defense, which was like, I would have not expected that going into this season a year and a half or 4 years ago, whenever this season started.
Well, because the last, and with the caveat that LeBron is and has been the best player in the world for a number of years, but the last couple of years, LeBron was frankly just taking most of the games off, right? He was just every couple of possessions, he would hustle a little bit more, play a little more man-on-man defense, but it just seemed like he was kind of just checking out and reserving himself for the playoffs, which totally understandable for a man of his age. But I think the most significant thing that happened this season is Anthony Davis started chirping at LeBron for missing his defensive assignments. Like once you have that accountability and there's the realization with amongst the team that nobody is above this, right? If we're going to win, everybody's got to buy in every possession. We have to commit to this defensive strategy, and that's going to be the ticket. By having LeBron buy in, there's no excuse. If you're Dwight Howard, are you going to say that you have a better reason to not play defense than the second best or best player of all time? No, of course you don't. Like, fall in behind your leader. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a GOAT or that level of player to have that sort of effect. But by setting such a strong example, LeBron and AD is evident what our identity was going to be from the start. There's nobody was above the rule of law. This is a team. We're in it together. And, I think it's the right strategy, because if you just look at it on paper, I was never worried about LeBron and AD scoring buckets. Never. Those are two of the most physically dominant people in the NBA. That was not going to be a problem. If we were ever going to lose, it was going to be because our defense wasn't getting it done. So to start from the defensive end and really establish your identity that way, and to just have faith that AD, LeBron, plus some shooters is going to get it done on the other end, like that was brilliant. Like I didn't know exactly what to expect with Frank Vogel and LeBron's buy-in and everything else this season, but I felt good about our chances, but I didn't think we would look this dominant this early. I think I would have guessed it would take a year before we could just kind of cruise through the playoffs, losing basically once around. And that was a decisive playoffs. Like we manhandled everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I felt good going into it, but I think that, not to get too much on the Clippers hate train, because I know they're hearing it from everywhere. I thought that they on paper looked deeper. The players that ended up stepping up had a history on the Lakers, our team, had a history of those sort of personality issues, right? Like Rondo in Sacramento or Dallas, Dwight, pick a team, Morris, and I think that is a huge testament to again, piggyback on Brian Windhorst, like the golden trade-off or whatever he calls it. Like, if LeBron's on your team, he's gonna blow it up. Your coach is gonna get fired. You're gonna whatever. Like he's gonna play GM and all that stuff. But history shows you're much more likely to make the finals than not. And I think all those players getting to the tail end of their career, they just made that choice. Like, I'm gonna put ego aside. And yeah, I mean, Dwight, Rondo, Morris, KCP puts up Kuzma. I mean, even Kuzma, right? Like, Kuzma looks like a baby deer walking on Crisco when he tries to play defense, but at least he's trying now, right? Like, and we saw him.
He's gotten better. He's like, I'm not going to say that he's an above average NBA defender, but he's near average.
Yeah, I just think he still makes a lot of like boneheaded, like he just bites on a lot of fakes and like misses rotations. And like, again, it's like he has a lot of talent as an offensive, especially when he has the ball a lot. I don't want to hate on Kuzma. I don't buy the whole like he doesn't. There's the campaign to deny him a ring or something like.
What?
It's like a change.org petition and like 10,000 people or what, I don't remember how many people basically signed.
Real quick, stop being so toxic, Laker fans. This is a terrible look.
Well, I mean, that's nothing new.
Green and his fiance, like I think like that is horrendous. Nobody should ever get a death threat because of any, like, I would never get a death threat even to a Celtic, much less a Laker.
But let's be honest, Lakers fans, as much as I love that team and will always go to bat for them, Lakers fans are among the worst in pro sports. We're up there with Yankees fans and Pats fans and Celtics fans.
It's there's times that I'm ashamed to be a Lakers fan because like 2 years ago when there was those idiots protesting outside of Staples Center, I forget even what they were protesting. They wanted one of the buses fired or they wanted Plinka fired. I forget whatever the hell they were, but it was stupid. Like whatever your cause was, it was a nonsense thing to do, and it made us all look stupid and of like a bunch of petulant children. Like when you have this much success as a franchise, when you are the biggest franchise in the NBA, you're going to have a whole lot of fans. So that's going to include a lot of dummies and a lot of great people. So you just kind of have a big collection, but. Denying Kuzma a ring, come on now. Like we're better than that. We don't.
I wonder how many of those people are ex Warriors / Heat / Spurs fans. I think the people who continue to watch the Lakers through that decade of, through the desert, like I think that humbled you a little. It had to humble you, right? Like we looked like shit. We trotted out some absolutely dog shit lineups. I mean, it was hard to continue watching those games, and I continued because I know you watched through some of the worst of it too. I'm not trying to say, we had to wait a decade to get another chip, right? Like, but it did definitely. We ate some crow in those 10 years, and if you come out like your shit don't stink and like all that stuff after winning the championship, it's like. I don't know. I think those are the ones who just those are the type of people who are obnoxious about just about anything. So whether or not it's Lakers or politics or whatever, the best Philly cheesesteak, like there's always that type of fan. So I think it's best to just ignore them. But I thought it was funny that that happened because there were definitely some moments where I was screaming at my TV based on something Kuzma had done.
You look at him, you look at the way he plays, his physical capabilities, his shot, and you feel like you should be doing about twice as much as what he is doing. Mm-hmm. But some of what he is doing is great. Like I found the biggest thing that he improved upon was his off-ball movement, where like there's one possession in particular, I think it was game 5, where he was in the corner, shot the 3 ball, missed, LeBron got the rebound, and Kuzma was already cutting to the rim, and like on his way, LeBron just fed him the pass right in the basket. So like, I think he's getting better used to the offensive system, and maybe he has a bounce back next year. He finds a shot a little bit more, but like, I don't know. I kept waiting for his 30-point game in the playoffs, and it's kind of, where is that? And maybe we don't need that. Maybe with KCP and Rondo and enough other people stepping up, we don't need a consistent third banana. But I still have hope Kuzma can kind of elevate his game a little bit more. But if you told me that Kuzma was the piece that we had to put into a trade to make a trade for whatever, throw a target in there, Jeremy Grant, or yeah,
Mm.
I no hesitation.
Yeah.
Shoot him out. I like the player. I hope Kuzma can stay around and make some big shots for us. But if he's what's stand between us and the next step, I'm ready to take that step.
Yeah, I feel the same way about. I think there were two bananas and a handful of plantains, little baby plantains, and I would be okay moving any of them at this point.
Except
I,
Rondo.
yeah, I was gonna say Rondo would be the one I would hang on to, which is so weird to be like. I'm a genuine Rondo fan now, which feels kind of
He's the best. He's such like
he's great, yeah. And I thought some of the stories that came out of the locker room about him, specifically the LeBron stuff about like, hey, look, when you your body language like this, or you just kind of blow off like these young guys, like you are God to them. You know what that would do to their confidence. Like, no, for sure. I think I have an irrational, disdain for him because of his years with the Celtics. But hey, he won us a ring, so I have no issues with him anymore. I'd be interested. I don't really know too much about the intricacies about like our cap space next year, what our contracts look like. I think that'd be an interesting conversation to have with Craig, since he's pretty good at that stuff. But I am interested to see what we move, because I don't know if this team necessarily does it again next year, if some of the proposed trades happen. But I mean, I think we do have a good chance.
I personally think that we're going to be better next year. I think we're gonna swap out JaVale for Boogie, and I think we're gonna make some other improve. Like I think we're gonna sign like a couple veterans, like a Mo Harkless. There's just gonna be a couple guys like, oh hey yeah, I'll sign for a cheaper contract so I can go win one with LeBron.
Yeah.
I think we'll have a better bench, but also like, what am I afraid of? Who am I afraid of in the league? What team entering next season looks like they're poised to take us down?
Yeah, I don't know. That is a good question. Is Giannis is not going anywhere next year, right? Unless he like forces a trade.
I think he's a free agent in 2021. So in the summer 2021. So, or whatever the offseason is in this new crazy world of delayed schedules.
Oh,
But so he's got one more year under contract. I I don't see Milwaukee trading him under any circumstance. Even if you have the feeling that he's going to leave, I feel like the play is you have to try to win a championship that year to convince him to stay. Like, unless it's just super inevitable and he's already said, I'm going to the Mavericks, get KP if you can't. Maybe there's a circumstance, but yeah, that's it. Like, I'm not that scared of the Bucks. I'm not. What are the Sixers gonna frighten me? Are the Clippers gonna, like, the Nuggets?
No.
There's
Heat's going to be interesting. They got some cap space, and I think they're young players. Even though I think they did benefit a lot from playing in the bubble, like I don't think Tyler Hero or Robinson have those types of games with a bunch of tens of thousands of angry fans screaming at them. I might be wrong, but I do think that they're going to take a step. I think I'm all aboard the Jimmy Butler train now. Like that dude is an absolute dog, and just it must feel so good for him, even though they didn't win the championship, to look back on all those other teams and all of the pundits who were like, he's toxic. The fact is, no one worked as hard as he did. He was dealing with a lot of personalities that just weren't willing to put the time and the effort and the just the grind, and you end up in Miami, which is arguably the perfect culture for him. And I mean, you saw how that is about as big of an overperforming expectations as I can remember.
yeah.
So I think they're going to be good for sure.
I like the Heat all season, but I didn't like them. I didn't think they were finals bound. Like I assumed it was going to be the Bucks probably, unless the Sixers got it together. But yeah. Jimmy Butler is he's an all-time character. Like, people will say like, oh, I wish we had tape, or we could go back and watch the Dream Team practice in '92 in Monte Carlo or wherever they were at that point. I don't know how much I would pay, probably a stupid amount, but I so would want to be at that Minnesota practice where Jimmy Butler's playing with the B team and not scoring any buckets, but dominating every facet of the game and calling out Glenn Taylor saying, you fucking need me.
Yeah.
Like, just,
I
yeah,
think it was the C team actually. I think it was the third stringers, and they beat the starters, if I remember correctly. At least that's what the legend says. But yeah. Anyway, I'm a fan for life, having watched what he did throughout the playoffs. Dude is like such a baller. Yeah, I mean, I think that covers it, right?
yeah, pretty much.
My watch tells me I have to stand right now. I've been sitting here too long. Anything else you wanted to cover? I mean, we didn't talk about how fantastic my score was, but that's all right.
I mean, I mean, honestly, the truth is, I think we're going to have to edit this a little anyway, so we might as well just do a little bit of score talk. So
We're going live, dude. Fuck it.
we're going live. Well, I'm going to record an intro at the very least after. Let's talk a little score, and then I'll record an intro, and then we'll be all good to go. But honestly, like, the most consistent compliment I get about the movie, and like, people are happy with the acting, they're happy with everything, of course, but the most consistent thing is that music is amazing. Like, it fits perfectly. And in coming up with the idea and writing it and shooting it, like, I had these very specific songs in my head. Like, I was listening to a lot of Dylan, a lot of Neil Young, like a lot of just kind of Americana, and then also this dissonant stuff like Godspeed You Black Emperor. And I had a very specific sonic palette in my head, and you managed to not only translate that but improve upon it and just make it its own entire thing, not indebted to influences. But it's an organic score that feels just like, it doesn't feel, none of it feels tacked on to the movie, right? It all just feels like it's almost like you just plugged a speaker into the house and that's what came out. So yeah, I guess that's not really a question. That's more just kind of a lot of.
Hey, I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, I thank you. I honestly, I really enjoyed working on it. It was my first experience doing a score, and I think I went about it in a pretty, like, or we went about it in an unorthodox way, right? Like, for me to send you a bunch of stuff early on, like, I've been working on a film now where I'm actually doing it to picture, and it's just such a different experience, and I enjoy it a lot. And I think that there's a lot to be said for, like, even with the one I'm working on now, like, I did a lot of work before writing compositions, trying to come up with motifs and stuff, but just coming up with songs and sending them out to you because I didn't know how else to do it. And I had this like severe anxiety about just getting the whole movie, and it's just like, all right, score this. And I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. So the idea was to at least get something under my belt, some sort of working, even if we didn't use any of those songs, that at least we would have an idea that, like, I knew that you would be okay with that direction. And I think that the fact that we have known each other for going on more than 15 years, we spent
Wrong.
plenty, yeah, definitely too long, plenty of time, smoking weed in the car, listening to music. We have this rapport and sort of understanding about, like, what it is about certain songs and artists that are inspiring to us. So I thought that made my job a lot easier, just being able to have those conversations. The influences that you sent over, the playlist, it sort of set a great roadmap. And I basically was just, like, trying to channel, like, Neil Young for a lot of it, but maybe a little more dissonant at times. Yeah, that was another thing that sort of hit me, watching it on TV finally when it came out, was how rewarding it is, to see. Because I've heard our song, obviously I've heard the songs that I've done with, like, Young the Giant and other projects, but this was such a different format. And I think, especially given how weird this year has been, and all the touring plans that were set up have gone out the window. So having sort of a little bit of a lead up going into this idea that maybe I could, try my hand at scoring, it's given me something else to work on and to focus on that I'm finding I really love it. I've always loved film. I've always loved music. I never really thought about doing them together. And whether or not this becomes something that I can pursue more seriously down the road, at the very least, it's something that I am excited about, like, continuing to work on. And yeah, I mean, overall, like, I had a lot of trepidation going into it, and I'm happy that it turned out well. And I think that it was a great partnership that, we were both kind of, we talked about this earlier, like, we were learning on the job. I didn't feel like I was going up to someone who necessarily had like the standing to just be like, this is shit, right? Like, I was like, all right, well, I'm doing this for free, and he's like, kind of like, we're friends. Like, he's not gonna yell at me about this, so that gave me enough sort of like flexibility and travel to feel like I could, just try it. And I'm glad I did, because I think it turned out well, and it was a really fun and fulfilling experience.
I definitely felt like yelling, but I didn't want to bruise your artistic ego.
My fragile drummer ego. Yeah. Speaking of drummer ego, that Ringo quote that you put on, last little music thing. When I was a younger man when we did that interview, and I was, maybe a little too dismissive of Ringo. And in the following years, I obviously, like, when your bandmates are some of the best songwriters of all time, it's always going to be very difficult to stand out. But I think it's important not to downplay what Ringo has done for modern rock drumming, for the fact that he is a part of that group of drummers that sort of created like the hook fill. Like, you can actually sing Ringo fills, right? Like, I think that's pretty huge. And I apologize for ever throwing, casting shade on Ringo, because dude is a beast and has great feel, and is such a musical drummer. And I think I really actually owe a lot of like my ear and the way that I approach that instrument to him. So I'm sorry, Ringo. I was young. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, and to be fair to you, I was asking a purposefully leading question to try to get a reaction out of you, but
You journalists.
But Octopus's Garden is a jam. Like, what do you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's at least top 300 Beatles songs.
Of course, Ringo's a part of you. Like, I don't. If you grew up without the Beatles being a part of your musical education, it feels like you just don't understand rock and roll. Like, like it's like a central part of everything. Music.
Yeah, you're missing, like, if you're trying to make that type of music, I think you're missing like a part of the musical alphabet that
Yep.
you would, maybe need to rely on. But yeah, I mean, I listened to a lot of the Beatles growing up. I think that now, as I've gotten older, I don't know, I don't find myself really listening to those records as much as I did when I was younger. But I still do absolutely think that they're a part of my musical vocabulary, for sure.
Yep. Well, I think we pretty much covered everything. I'm just gonna let's do one little last segment just for funsies to see how this goes. You answer first, and then I'll answer, or I can go first if you feel on the spot. But
Okay.
what's the last? Just what's a great thing you've done or watched or read or listened to, or just what's something recently that captured you that you feel like people should seek out or is worth experiencing or anything like that?
Okay. I mean, there's this band called Salt, SAULT, that one of our producers, John Hill, turned us on to, and they're kind of this. I guess they're a collective. They're based out of the UK. That's pretty much all that anyone knows about them. They're super leaning into this like mystery thing, and they've been putting out like a couple records every year for the past couple years. And there's just this the songwriting, the tones, the vibe that it captures is like you could just put 2 or 3 of the records on back to back, and it really creates this amazing sort of world. I really love. It feels like very human music, and especially the rhythm section, which I will admit I tend to gravitate towards. The players are all just so locked in, but still very human. You feel like you're in the room. The way they record, you feel like you're in the room with them, and that there's a tendency in modern music, and we are 100% guilty of this, is to make performances like maybe a little antiseptic, because it's so easy to edit and to treat sound in a way that makes it really punchy, and you're competing for people's ears, so you want it to be at the very forefront. And I think that you need to make an active decision nowadays to not do that, and they've done that, and it's just a really, really great sound that takes from all sorts of different influences, but it still feels really original. So I would recommend just about any of their records, honestly.
No, I haven't given them a chance yet. I got to check those guys out.
Yeah. What do you got?
So I'm just tempted just to say Future Islands in general, because I've just been super into their discography recently. But I've recently become obsessed with this miniseries that I'm sure it was a big deal when it came out, because it was like 89 or 90 or something like that. But it's Lonesome Dove. There's a miniseries based on an old book by Larry McMurtry. It's a Western, and it stars Robert Duvall, Tommy Lee Jones, Danny Glover, and then like all these people pop up. Like Steve Buscemi pops up, Margot Martindale pops up. Like it's this like Diane Lane is the love. Like it's just Angelica Houston. It's a crazy packed cast, and it's just like a wonderful sweeping Western where a bunch of cowboys down in Texas decide that they're going to do a cattle drive up to Montana. So it's them on a cattle drive, and they get into some scrapes and some fights and have to track down this dude and that dude. And the vast majority of it is, it's either a great landscape or Robert Duvall just being like, just a fun bastard. Just like that kind of like sassy talking, just like, I don't give a crap type of cow. Like,
Yeah.
I could just watch 8 hours of Robert Duvall doing this character. So
I love me some Robert Duvall. So I will check it out. Thanks for the tip.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that pretty much does it. So yeah, appreciate you talking to me. I guess now I have to do a podcast to talk to my friends, but that's the way this world's gone. So what are you gonna do?
Hey, you take what you can get. I'm a busy man.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was fun. I mean, it's all subjects I enjoy talking about. We would have been talking about it anyway, so
Exactly.
might as well record it for posterity's sake.
Might as well give it to the people.